On to tonight's meeting of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee. I think we've got a group of people in the back stalls from the Burundara Youth Voice. No heckling during this meeting, thank you. Before we commence the meeting, I request that all mobile phones are turned off or switched to silent. Thanks very much. My name is Councillor Westgold and I chair this committee. I will start by introducing my fellow councillors. On my left is Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth, Councillor Shima Abuki, Councillor Sophie Tournay, our Mayor, Councillor Michael Nolan, Councillor Felicity Sinfield. On the other side of the chamber is Councillor Mal Osborne, Councillor John Friend Pereira and Councillor Chris Pattis. Councillor Franco will be joining us tonight on the screen. He's an apology. Thank you. I also acknowledge Director Urban Living, Mr. Scott Walker on my right, and Manager Governance and Legal, Mr. Brian Wee on my left. There are other officers who will present during the evening and they'll be introduced as they come forth. As a general introduction, the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting is being live streamed on the Council YouTube to enable public viewing of the proceedings. The meeting is also being recorded and will be made available on also in Council's YouTube as soon as practicable meeting. The primary purpose of the Urban Delegated with issues under the Planning and Environment Act and the Building Act. This committee has delegated authority to make decisions on behalf of Council. For those presenting this evening, and there are a couple, when we come to the agenda item, it will be introduced by an officer who will give a report. I will then call you to come forward one by one to address the committee. If you're making a submission, please present your viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose an application. Please do not repeat what earlier speakers have said and stick to relevant issues. If you're opposed to the planning application, please tell the committee why you disagree and suggest an alternative approach that may satisfy your concerns. Please focus on your concerns rather than matters of history or detail in the officer's report. I will point out at this time there is a very strict limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, and that includes councillors. And whilst as chair I can vary that, it is seldom done. At the 2.5 minute mark, I shall ring a bell, which indicates you've got 30 seconds left to complete your presentation. For those in the gallery this evening, I'm sure you'll all be well behaved, but I just point out that we do expect you to show due courtesy and respect for each other and no inappropriate behaviour. I'd finally like to say when speaking, and this applies to all of us, make an effort to speak directly into the microphone so we can all clearly hear what you're saying. I will now move to apologies. Mr. Wee, are there any apologies this evening?
Through you, Chair, this evening Councillor Baillieu and Councillor Franco are apologies.
Thank you. I will now move to the adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 3rd of February of this meeting. Councillors, can I have a motion to adopt these minutes? Councillor Abuki.
Happy to move, Chair.
Can I have a seconder? Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Happy to second that.
Thank you very much. Is anyone opposed? All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. I'll now move to declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officer. Councillors, council officers, are there any conflicts of interest that will foreshadow matters on tonight's agenda? There don't appear to be any. Thank you. We'll now move into the body of the meeting. Presentation of officers' reports. Tonight, under 3.1, the only item on the agenda is 16 Cornell Street, Camberwell, the addition of car parking area for an existing aged care facilities, PP 24/0474. And tonight, the officer's report will be presented by Jordan Schonberg. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair.
I present UPDC item number 3.1 relating to planning permit application PP240474 at 16 Cornell Street in Camberwell. A crushed rock car park area has been built adjacent to the rear car parking area within the site. This car park replaced an existing area of driveway and lawn. The proposal seeks retrospective approval for the works within this area and to complete the car parking works. The subject site is within a general residential zone, Schedule 4, and within the heritage overlay. The car park area will be initially constructed of crushed rock with 9 screening trees proposed within a mulch garden bed to the southern boundary of the works. The development has been assessed by Council's internal experts, including arborist, heritage advisor, drainage and traffic officer. All referrals are fully supportive of the development, subject to the recommended permit conditions. A total of 31 objections to the application have been received. It is noted that 1/3 of the objections received by Council originated from outside the immediate local neighbourhood. It is considered that a notice of decision to grant a planning permit should be issued having regard to the residential aged care facility clause and the heritage overlay. Overall, the proposal achieves a high level of compliance with the planning scheme requirements, including setbacks from the street and neighbouring properties, preservation of open space for the enjoyment of residents. It is considered appropriate to seek a condition requiring the sealing of the car park to an asphalt or similar surface within 2 years, along with construction of curb and channel and associated drainage works. Permit conditions are also recommended, seeking landscaping works to be undertaken prior to any operation of the car park, planting of additional trees, protection of existing trees, and demonstration of wheel stops and line markings within the plans. Happy to take any questions at the appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Tonight, we have 2 people wishing to make submissions in the chamber. One has indicated they're against and the other for the proposal. Once I call your name, I'd ask you to come forward and join us at the horseshoe table. There is a chair waiting, and I will remind you of the strict 3-minute limit on speaking. Before you commence, I will ask you to give us your name and the suburb in which you live. So we will start with Mr. Anthony Kalia. You just start with your name for the record and the suburb in which you live.
Anthony Kalia, Camberwell.
Thank you.
Thank you. My property shares the southern boundary with the subject site, and I have been a resident at the Realm Estate since June 2013. These are 6 reasons why we believe Council should refuse the application. Number 1, justification for additional car spaces. With 100 lodging rooms at Nazareth House, the car parking requirement in the planning scheme is 30 car spaces. With 62 car spaces available within the site, we submit this is more than adequate. No justification for an additional 19 spaces. Item 2, location, a viable alternate location for a car park. A viable and more appropriate location for a permanent car park is on the eastern side of the subject site with access from Ellsworth Crescent. A car park in this location would not impact the amenity of local residents. Number 3, drainage. A drainage plan has not been submitted. As highlighted in the video and photo sent email to councillors, water captured within the car park should be disposed of via the legal point of discharge. At this point in time, this is a liability for council and neighbouring properties. Number 4, car park design. The site survey demonstrates a level difference of more than 3.4 metres from the highest to the lowest point within the car park. The site naturally contours down in a southerly direction towards adjoining properties. With the proposed entry at the top of the car park, the concern is vehicles travelling downwards with lights shining into ground floor living rooms as well as first floor bedrooms. There's also a concern around the safety in terms of the direction of travel. A better approach into the car park would be from the eastern side where the land is flatter. Item 5, some screening trees are noted. We submit the application would vastly improve with increased landscaping. Creating a perimeter of trees and greenery would better respond to the surrounding garden environs. Number 6, staged permit. The proposed planning conditions stipulate a staged permit. We submit this is not acceptable or appropriate to allow the applicant to use this unlawful car park. At this point in time, the decision-making right lies with council. Allowing such use of an unlawful car park sends the wrong message to the applicant and the broader community. We submit it is not appropriate for the fundamental elements of car park design to be left to chance. The deficiencies of this application cannot be dealt with via permit conditions. These include lack of landscaping, modification of vehicle entry and exit points, and drainage. Having considered the information presented this evening, we respectfully request council issue a notice of refusal and direct the applicant to reinstate the area to the condition prior to the construction of the unlawful car park. Thank you.
Thank you. Pretty much spot on time. Councillors, are there any questions of this speaker tonight? Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you very much for your succinct and well-reasoned presentation tonight, Mr. Kalia. Thank you. One question from me only. You felt that drainage, planting, I think screening was another word you used, were not matters that could be ably addressed by planning permit conditions. Can you elaborate on that, please, as to why you think they can't be?
I just feel that this car park was constructed back in June last year. The applicant was issued with a notice that they cannot use it. If I was in the applicant's shoes, I would have said, okay, we've done the wrong thing. We're going to redesign the car park to account for these concerns. The 31 objections clearly outlined the reasons why, as neighbours, we are concerned for our properties, we are concerned for safety, flooding, etc. And the applicant has made no attempt to respond or listen to our concerns.
But to my question, why these matters, and they're good points you've raised, and they're in the report, drainage, planting, why you feel that they cannot be addressed by properly worded conditions?
Well, the conditions that are presented in the council officer's report allow for this two-stage process, and that's, I believe, highly unusual. And so I feel that if council was to adopt the report findings, the conditions would need to be completely rewritten. And there should be some kind of design consultation, perhaps with the community, or, you know, it's just leaving it to chance. I guess, yeah, there is the risk that there could be a poor design outcome if, you know, the community isn't engaged.
Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Clare, thank you for your presentation. I heard you mention impacts on you and your neighbouring properties with regard to vehicle headlights, is that correct, coming into bedroom windows?
Yes.
And you talked about drainage and water runoff. I believe you also mentioned screening would need to be of a fairly significant planting regime to help mitigate that. Did you also mention noise? I'm not sure. I've spoken to several residents, and I've also read quite a lot of emails from the objectors, and I've heard quite routinely that it's also the noise of the rock. Is that something that disturbs you?
Yes, obviously the crushed rock surface is noisy and allows dust to accumulate and run off into the properties. And obviously there's vehicle noise in the evenings. You know, one of the reasons why we purchased that realm, and which this land was owned by Nazareth House, was the fact that we had this beautiful north-facing garden aspect. And so to wake up rudely one morning and see all these trucks out the front, or out the back, was very concerning. And, you know, it was concerning, alarming for myself, my wife, my kids, because of the elevation and the proposed entry point at the top of the car park. You're literally at eye level with vehicles traversing down. And so I've put together a sketch there of what I believe would be a more appropriate outcome for a permanent car park if that's the way things went. You know, there's a perimeter of screening trees, you know, really enhancing that sort of greenery, removing the entry at the top, lowering the car park level slightly so it's not as visible and visually intrusive, and the noise isn't such an issue, sealing it properly, appropriately, with perhaps like an exposed aggregate finish that doesn't cause the same issues that crushed rock does. And I believe the access via the existing car park on the eastern side is more appropriate. It's a more level surface, and it means that also if you're travelling with the current proposal, exiting at the northern tip of the car park, I would find that a bit of an issue, because you've got cars coming down and you've got the car park driveway sort of behind you at an oblique angle. So it creates a tricky traffic conditions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Collier, and thank you for all the work and for coming along here tonight and everything you've done to try and get a good result. It's clear the applicant, it seems like the applicant hasn't done the right thing here, and I can well empathise with the frustration that's created. So sort of sit here trying to find a way through, and you've come up with I think primarily an alternate access with addressing the screening and the drainage, and talked about the surface. Is there a sequence that you would see? That's where my mind is going. So is there a sequence where, let's say the car park was done and sealed, so the dust and the noise was done and the screening was done and things were done in a particular sequence that you've thought about that would in some ways be acceptable?
Yes, we've discussed this with the neighbours. We believe the existing crushed rock car park should not be used in the interim. It should be completely removed, lowered, and then rebuilt with, there would be a requirement for some retaining walls along the north. There are those 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces that I've moved off. They were hard up against the driveway. I've moved them slightly off. And again, this is just my very crude sketch, so you know, excuse the sketch qualities of it. But the concept is there, where there's a landscaping buffer, and I believe the landscaping should be an important element, and mature trees planted. And it should be completely built properly, drained properly, and sealed, line markings, wheel stops, etc., etc. That's if council decides to follow the lead and build it in, accept it in this location. But I will say that point number 2 was there is another viable alternate location, and that's via Ellsworth Crescent, where there is already existing car parking. So that car park there could be expanded.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abuki.
Thank you, Mr. Collier. Have you had the opportunity to have any discussions with Nazareth House?
Very early on. So when the works took place and the trucks were digging out the land behind our property, I did approach and I spoke with the manager there, Jennifer, and also the CEO, David Cotter, and I just asked what was going on because we were in the dark. We didn't receive any notification of any works, and I was advised that it was a temporary car park because they were doing some renovation works to, I believe, a kitchen that they needed to bring up to standard. So, and I questioned whether they had received planning approval and permits and so on, and I was told that their experts were handling it, but I was left disappointed in that the interaction wasn't successful. We didn't achieve a resolution. They just continued on their path of constructing this car park, and it wasn't until I notified council and made some inquiries that I discovered that, yes, you actually do need a permit, whether the car park is temporary or permanent. The property is under a heritage overlay, and then that was it. And then it was up to just council enforcement. And you know, the car park has been used from time to time, even though they've received instructions to seal off the perimeter. It still is open, and occasionally there are cars that park there, and we just notify council. And, yeah.
So Nazareth House wouldn't be aware of your suggestion to relocate the car park on the eastern side?
That was on the objection letter. So the applicant was made aware of it back then, but there's been sort of no further discussions about expanding that side rather than where it currently is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Friend Priera.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for coming tonight. What would be the top 3 conditions that you would like to see amended in the permit if it was to go ahead?
Definitely not a staged permit. I believe the works current works need to be removed in their entirety so that the car park can be built properly. Properly designed plans. So a car park that makes reference to civil engineering for drainage, that makes reference to traffic engineering for appropriate traffic flow and safe movement in and out of the car park, and allows for all those safety issues, and a more robust landscape plan.
Councillor Tournay.
Thank you, Anthony. Can we just bring back the overhead slide with that's it. Just a really simple question. So the access from the east, so is that still coming down the same driveway and then spinning around?
Correct, yes. So there's an existing driveway that travels southeasterly.
Yep.
So then you would then turn left into the existing car park.
Okay.
That's there.
Yes.
Or you do a right into the proposed car park.
Coming and sort of spinning around. So you would still get the lights from the cars, they still come, it's still the same driveway. And do those lights come into your property now?
Not travelling in that, if they're traversing along the southeasterly direction, it doesn't impact.
Yep.
It's the ones that, if they came down from that northern tip,
Yep.
then they're directly into living rooms, bedrooms.
And that's where, is that the height differential? They're coming up high and then
Correct.
coming down. Okay,
Yep.
I just needed.
It's some 3.5 metres. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Just one follow-up question, if I may, through you, Chair. Your proposal here includes retaining, I think is it the apricot tree? That large tree?
So there's another point there. So that tree number 2 there that I've marked, that is an existing tree. The original car park was constructed, it actually encroached 30% into the tree protection zone. That's what Rob Galbraith noted in his arborist report. So the applicant was required to reduce that encroachment down to less than 10%, which is the acceptable level, and I believe they've done that. So that tree would remain, and I would hope that it's healthy. It has leaves on it now. It didn't back then. It does have leaves on it now, and it appears to be healthy. But I would encourage, there's some, there's number 8 there, showing some additional shrubs and increasing that landscaping element. The car park as it's drawn currently is a vast space. And I believe that once you allow for the appropriate size of spaces and aisle widths, there is an opportunity for more landscaping. I just think back to my childhood and, going out to Hillsville Sanctuary, and you've got sort of the main car park with sort of trees scattered in there, and then you've got the overflow car park, and it feels inviting to drive into a space that, and also the other advantage of additional landscaping and trees is that it provides some cover for the people parking their vehicles there. So it's a win-win. They provide the screening, there's cover for the sun protection and so on. The car park surface doesn't get so hot. So a lot of benefits in a more robust landscape design.
We don't appear to have any further questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Kalia. You can return to the gallery.
Thank you very much.
I shall now call upon Phil Gleeson to come forward.
Thank you, Chair and councillors, for allowing me to present this evening. As been mentioned by the Chair, my name is Phil Gleeson. I'm from Urbis, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Nazareth Care.
Your residential address or the business address?
Business address
Suburb, anyway.
is in Melbourne.
Yep.
Melbourne CBD.
Thank you.
But as I said, I'm here on behalf of Nazareth Care. So Nazareth Care is an established aged care provider. It's been operating on the site for over 50 years. And we support the recommendation of the officers to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit. We acknowledge that the works were undertaken initially without a permit, and Council's enforcement officer approached Nazareth Care and advised them a planning permit is required, and hence why they engage us to assist them with that process, and the reason why we are here this evening. So the proposed application seeks to formalise 19 additional car spaces to meet the demand of visitors, staff and contractors attending the site, thereby minimising demand for on-street car parking. As noted within the council officer's report, the use of a residential aged care facility does not require a permit, and as a result, council's assessment is limited to the buildings and works only. At the time of land lodging the application, there was consideration of the adjoining properties to the south, that being setbacks in the order of between 10 and 13 metres from the southern boundary, and the screen planting along the southern boundary, the southern edge and the western return of the car park. In addition, post receipt of the objections received, our client volunteered to council officers, did introduction of wheel stops, line markings, and additional planting, which is being formalised through conditions of permit requiring 2 additional trees. As noted by officers, this application has the full support of council's internal departments, including heritage team, council's arborist, council's traffic and transport team, and council's drainage engineer. We just note some of the key points from the officer's recommendation is that the proposed planting will help screen light spill from vehicles within the site and present as a partial noise barrier. The proposal achieves a high level of compliance with the relevant policy, and the works present a considered response to the site. Other notes or points from the officer's report is the proposed car park is generally in accordance with the relevant design requirements and Australian standards. The proposed works present a minor encroachment into tree protection zones. Council's arborist has not raised ongoing concerns with the health of tree 1 and 2 subject to tree protection conditions. And from an overall drainage perspective, Council's drainage engineer does not expect the car park will have an adverse impact on either the drainage system or adjoining properties. And Council's heritage advisor has also advised that the heritage fabric will remain intact and will not be impacted by the proposal.
Mr. Gleeson, could you move towards wrapping up now? Thank you.
Certainly will. As noted in this brief presentation, the application has sought to respond to the concerns of objectors and has the full support of Council's internal departments. And it is for these reasons that I respectfully request the councillors to support the recommendation of officers to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit.
Thank you, Mr. Gleeson. Councillors, are there any questions of this presenter? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Gleeson, and appreciate you coming and explaining the history and the staging up to this date. You heard the presenter earlier talk about the impacts of several of the residents that are approaching and facing the car park, and because of the levels of the 3 metre rise and the headlights shining into their bedroom windows. I'm sure you also heard the dialogue about the impact of the noise disturbing their sleep. Are you in a position to speak on behalf of your client to say whether or not any of those matters could be considered, or?
Sure.
Yes.
Through you, Chair. That's the first time that we've seen that alternate plan being presented this evening. There was 5 trees that were identified on the western edge of that car park, which our client would be happy to accept as an additional condition of the permit to help, I guess, with the screening of that car park. With respect to the 2 stages of the crushed rock and then the sealing of the car park, again, our client is very accepting of that 2-stage approach for that car park to be sealed within 2 years. We know the objectors also raised some options about an alternate arrangement to the east of the building. I guess my initial reaction to that is that would potentially be problematic from a heritage perspective in terms of having that car parking located, I guess, adjoining the main heritage building with closer proximity to the front or the streetscape. So to summarise this, our client is happy with to accept the condition of the 5 additional trees to the west of the site and comfortable with the conditions around that 2-staged conditions or construction of a sealed car park.
I may have a follow-up question. Would you foreshadow that there would be any issue or problem with bringing the staging forward?
Through you, Chair. I don't have instruction from that from our client. With, I guess, this first stage, they'll be reviewing, I guess, the car parking across the site, and that may mean that stage 2 is brought further forward, but I don't have any confirmed instructions on that at the moment.
Thank you.
Councillor Osborne-Smith.
I had a similar question about staging, but I think that's been answered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That appears to have exhausted questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Gleeson.
Thank you.
We will now return to the officers for matters arising, and quite a few matters have been raised tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I might just respond in the first instance and just put a little bit of context behind your considerations this evening on this matter. And what we do need to be careful is to bear in mind what needs a permit and what you have got to consider here. It needs a permit because of heritage. So when we think about heritage, it's the heritage impacts and considerations of the car park that we need to take on board. We also have a buildings and works component associated with the aged care facility, but we have no control over the use of that land and the use of that facility. So our considerations in regard to this car park are quite narrow and quite limited. And we also need to consider whether what has been put forward by the applicant is appropriate, and then attach appropriate or suitable conditions relative to the scale of the considerations under the planning scheme. Whilst there might be very good alternative locations or other locations, it's not for us to sit here and redesign the car park and to come up with an alternative location. Your job this evening is to consider, is this an acceptable outcome having regard to the planning controls and with appropriate planning conditions? So we need to make sure that we're very careful in how we go about it, particularly in light of some of the discussion around an alternative proposal put forward by an objector, because it's not for you to decide whether you would like something else. It's, is this an acceptable proposal? I'll hand over to officers now to further respond to any other items that have been put forward and brought forward on this particular matter.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. One of the points that was raised was regarding the parking rate within the site. The facility currently provides for the car parking required by the planning scheme, and the proposed spaces are additional car parking, which would reduce the need for the use of on-street parking associated with the use of the facility. There is no maximum rate for a car parking provision, and a permit is not required to provide in excess of the specified parking rate. It is not possible to mount an argument against the additional spaces on the basis of need, but a favourable case can be made. A further point that was raised was in regards to rain flowing over the car park, and council did receive a video which did show the site in a significant rain event, and water was shown to be flowing over that area. In regards to that video, the water is flowing over the car park, but it follows the contours of the land. In what I mean by that is that the levels of the site have not been changed as a result of this car park. The water flows through the site into the culvert as expected, and then into the existing council drainage pit, and it was not shown to be draining into neighbouring properties. If the car park is to be sealed, the water will be directed through new drainage infrastructure directly into the existing council drainage pit. Both outcomes have been reviewed by council's drainage officer, who didn't raise any objection to the current conditions or the proposed sealing of the car park, subject to suitable drainage infrastructure. With regards to the alternative access to the car park that was put forward, being the access to the southeast of the car park rather than from the existing proposal to access from both the north and the southeast, the access from the southeast would confine access to and from this parking area to an existing single width driveway. That is an existing area of asphalt that accommodates access to the existing car park to the east. And this was reviewed by council's traffic engineer, who noted that it would be a poor outcome and would present possible access issues for the 30 vehicle parking spaces that would need to be accessed through that one single width access way, being that 30 vehicles, if you had vehicles entering and exiting that space, it's quite a significant single width area. You may get stuck, and there may have to be alternative vehicle manoeuvres to allow access for a car that wasn't visible as you turn through that space. With regards to light spill, the conditions seek that the car park is not to be utilised until screen planting has been undertaken. It is considered that the screen planting will help minimise light spill from the vehicle headlights into adjoining properties, and the screening provided by the planting will become more effective as the trees mature. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I may just add one more point through you, Chair. Anthony Collier indicated in his plan perhaps an opportunity for less hard paving and more landscaping opportunities, and our engineers have noted that there is more than ample space for the turning movements to occur, so perhaps there is an opportunity for rationalisation of that car parking area through a combination of reducing hard paving and adding landscaping opportunities.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions of the officers? Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just on this staging timeframe of 2 years, can you elaborate on why you feel 2 years is a reasonable time? Is that typical in conditions, works and conditions like this, or is there an opportunity to tighten that timeframe?
Through you, Chair. The car park was initially proposed on a temporary basis to provide parking while internal construction works were undertaken in the site. Now that the application seeks to construct this car park on a permanent basis, it was considered appropriate to give an opportunity to formalise the car park. This will involve a budgeting process, engineering, associated drafting of plans, and while these processes are ongoing, it would be considered acceptable to provide an opportunity to use that space in the meantime. While these however, measures to mitigate off-site impacts, such as screen planting, must be first undertaken. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Do you
I was just going to add, it perhaps is it is an unusual situation in that the car park was constructed unlawfully and initially on a temporary basis. It was viewed and considered initially as an overflow car park, and the application that has been put forward was to actually maintain the car park on a permanent basis as a crushed rock car park. It was officers in reviewing that that felt that a crushed rock arrangement would be acceptable for an interim period because it can be maintained over that interim period, but over the long term wouldn't be appropriate, and that then set the staging approach that has been taken.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
No question, but just wanted to foreshadow our motion at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks very much. Councillor Sinfield.
In anticipation of what's coming next, I was just ready to second that, so perhaps Councillor Hollingsworth might like to go first.
Without seeing it first, that's brave. Okay. There doesn't appear to be any further questions of officers, so we have now moved to that appropriate time. Councillor Hollingsworth, you have a motion.
I do, thank you, Chair. I believe governance have a motion that I've asked to be prepared as an alternate motion. Thank you. And if I may, because I believe it covers over 3 pages, thank you. So predominantly the amendments or inclusions are obviously highlighted in the yellow for councillors to peruse.
Okay. Councillor Sinfield, as is that the motion you're happy to second?
It is. It was circulated by email earlier.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hollingsworth, you would like to speak to this motion?
Yes, if I may speak briefly now, and thank Councillor Sinfield for seconding. The reason why I've worked with officers to construct an alternate motion is based on numerous phone calls, emails and conversations I've had with the most impacted residents that their properties abut this car park. And whilst I appreciate Nazareth has had a need to put temporary car park there, this has created great inconvenience and some trauma to the residents. I'm aware of one family in particular that has a very sick relative or a sick member in the family, and disturbed sleep, the noise of the crushed rock, the ongoing disruption. My understanding is that there isn't a lot of opportunity for council to not support an application for a car park. So if it's to be supported, I think as a good social, corporate relationship with the abutting residential property that have already endured a lot of trauma as a consequence of this, as a goodwill gesture, I would like to encourage Nazareth House to proceed, if this is supported by council, in a timely manner with minimal inconvenience, to undergo very thorough design concept, obviously with civil works plan by a qualified engineer that looks towards obviously installing adequate drainage, appropriate aspect, ideally lowering the site of the car park, if at all possible, to minimise the headlight inconvenience to the residents, and proceed with the works in a timely manner to provide a solid, at-grade surface that is sealed, that is marked, that has really good screening installed, with some additional planting being permanent evergreen trees that will maintain a suitable height, but also some soft landscape to improve the visibility of what the residents are looking out to. So the motion there is proposing to bring the staging forward, to act in a timely manner, to undertake the project within 12 months, and considering that there's already a lot of work that's gone into installing a temporary car park, the process is already well underway. The relationship has been established with council officers, and I think this would provide a balanced outcome to help recognise the 8 to 10 townhouse residents that are significantly impacted and will continue to be impacted until a car park is installed and until the tree green screening has grown to a height that can block out the headlight and inconvenience. And I also just wanted to note in this motion, there is also a comment made requesting with the car park spaces that waste cannot be stored or collected in this area, because the last thing residents would want to see is actually, just having waste bins sitting in car parks and then having commercial waste vehicles coming in at irregular hours, emptying waste vehicles. So I ask councillor colleagues to please consider the recommendation, and I will leave it there. Thank you.
No, So I have allowed Councillor Hollingsworth to explain this because it was issued very late in the day. Given that explanation, and I presume you've all had enough time to read it, I now move to seek if there's any opposition to the alternative motion as it now appears on the screen. There is none. Given that, Councillor Sinfield, I presume you don't need to speak to it either. I will therefore now move to put this alternative motion. All of those in favour? I believe that is unanimous. Thank you very much. The motion is carried. Thank you. We're going to move on to the general business. Councillors, are there any matters of general business this evening? There are none. Urgent business. Are there any items of urgent... Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Thank you, Chair. I will be very, very quick. When I spoke to move the alternate motion, I neglected to thank all of the residents and obviously the applicant for putting in their submission, but I also wanted to just thank the officers for their time because I do appreciate they've invested considerable time preparing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. No other items of general business? Urgent business? There are none. Confidential business? There is none. In closing the meeting, before I close, I want to thank all of you who have joined us this evening. And I declare the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting closed. Thank you all.